All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the Florida Football Podcast. I know that you're all listening to this and going, second? When was the first? We recorded an episode last week, but the file was corrupted, and we were unable to upload it. But because you probably don't know what this show is all about, it's just three of us were discussing all sorts of different football news, stats, our opinions on the latest football rumors and news. So with our first topic of the week for discussion, we're going to be talking about who we think is going to win. And now before we start that, I'm Brendan.
I'm Dylan.
And I'm Josh.
All right, so let's hop into it. So we're recording this on Saturday, the 19th. Thursday night, the Bengals played the Browns. The Browns won, I believe, 35-30. I predicted the Browns were going to win. They predicted that the Bengals were going to win. So let's quickly just sort of quickly review that game. I think Joe Burrow throwing the ball 61 times is...
Yeah, and he spread the ball around too. AJ Green didn't get as many catches as we would have expected. Boyd had a good game.
Yeah.
I think that a decent linebacking core and a good defensive line prevented, and a bad Bengals offensive line prevented Joe Mixon from running as much as they would have liked him.
Yeah, Joe Mixon is not helping me very much in fantasy right now.
Yeah.
People need to stop with the Tua slander, though. He hasn't even played yet, and everyone's already saying, "Oh, Joe Burrow is better than Tua." Tua hasn't played an NFL snap. Relax.
Yeah.
Sure. All right. So, first game we're going to be predicting Bears versus Giants. I have Giants in this one.
I have the Bears. I did like what I saw from the Giants last week. Daniel Jones had a pretty solid game for him. Didn't get sacked too much. Didn't have that many issues like that. But I just thought Saquon couldn't get it going. And the Bears, too, have a pretty good defensive line. Khalil Mack's going to be causing some havoc. Daniel Jones is fumble prone. So I definitely think the Bears have this one.
Okay, Josh.
I think that the Giants are going to win. I think if Daniel Jones played a game like he played last week and Saquon Barkley can turn it on with the run, I think that it'll be a pretty easy game for the Giants. I don't think the Bears' offense is that great. I think Mitchell Trubisky had a good week against a bad team, and I just don't see the same thing happening again.
Yeah. DeAndre Swift choked the game for the Lions, and that was really the only reason that the Bears won. Along with a lot of defensive failure, but Daniel Jones basically showed flashes of Eli Manning, and that he sort of stood there and took the abuse in the pocket, because that was sort of one of Eli Manning's specialties. He was sort of known as Iron Man Manning because the offensive line was terrible, and he'd get sacked over and over, but still deliver the throws. And there was some statistic. It was the most amount of pressure produced most plays in which pressure was produced within less than 2.5 seconds, and Steelers led the league in that last week with 25 plays. And I think
so that doesn't look good for the Giants offensive line.
It doesn't look good for the Giants offensive line, but it shows them where they need to improve, mostly off the edge, and you just Andrew Thomas needs to get better quick. But he did have a tough first matchup with Bud Dupree and TJ Watt. All right, Eagles versus Rams. I got Rams in this one. Rip Carson.
I also have Rams.
That line is terrible.
Yeah, the Eagles. Carson Wentz is not going to make it through the season.
Hot garbage.
Lane Johnson's coming back. That'll help a bit. But Brandon Brooks and essentially a rookie in Andre Dillard, because another injury to him, that's just not going to
I think Jason Peters is too old.
Too old, yeah. He's not doing anything.
They don't have it.
Falcons versus Cowboys. Or Cowboys versus Falcons, I mean. I got Falcons.
This will definitely be a fun one. but I have the Cowboys in this one because I think that offense will take it to that dismantled Falcons secondary.
I definitely have the Cowboys as well. I think that the Cowboys' offense can match up with them, and their defense is way better. I just think.
The Cowboys got robbed last week.
So,
But,
okay,
we'll talk
so
more about that one later.
well, quickly, the reason that I say Falcons over Cowboys is because one, I believe we are one of the only teams in the NFL who hasn't had a single player opt out. Amari Cooper is currently injured right now, and he's currently a game time decision with an ankle injury. Tyron Smith is a game time decision, and we saw what happened 2 years ago when Tyron Smith didn't play, and Adrian Claiborne got 6 sacks in one game on Dak Prescott. Sean Lee, I believe, is out. Leighton Vander Esch is out. I like Chidobe Awuzie and Anthony Brown, but I don't think they're going to be able to cover Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley.
And there was an injury update on the Amari Cooper situation. He was originally a game time decision, and then his situation got better, and he now doesn't have an injury designation, which probably means that he's almost 100%. And I think he'll be able to still lead that core. So Cowboys over Falcons.
And even without him, they still have good receivers with CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. I think they'd be okay, whether he played or not. The Falcons have no secondary.
I think the Falcons are going to be able to pull it out. I think AJ Terrell and our young secondary are going to know what they need to improve from the first week. All right, Buccaneers versus Panthers. I think this is Buccaneers easily.
I think Buccaneers. I think Tom Brady now has even more of a chip on his shoulder than before, really trying to prove he's not a system QB.
I think that the Panthers will win this game. I think that Christian McCaffrey. I mean, there's no fans. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think that Christian McCaffrey is going to have a big game this week. I don't think the Buccaneers D-line is that great. I think that he can definitely have a pretty good game. I think Teddy Bridgewater can have a good game as well. I'm not scared of anybody in the Buccaneers secondary. So I think that Teddy Bridgewater, he always makes all the right passes, the right moves. I think that if he makes no mistakes, it could be a really confident win for them.
I mean,
so last year,
I think the defensive line and linebacking core are good, though. I think with Devin White, Levante David, JPP, Shaquille Barrett, and then on the defensive line, Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh. And I'm trying to think
to go along with that, Christian McCaffrey only had 1.7 yards per carry against the Bucs last year.
Yeah,
I think he's on like wants to have a better game, especially after what happened last week, where on the 4th down they didn't give him the ball, and that pretty much cost him the game. I think that he's going to try and go out there and prove himself this week.
Yeah.
Broncos versus Steelers. I have Steelers in this one.
Definitely the Steelers. I feel like it's going to be similar game scripts for both teams to what they played last week, which will mean the Steelers' defensive line will take over. Ben will have a pretty good game. And against a secondary that's definitely worse than it once was.
Plus, the Broncos don't have a good offensive line anyways.
Yeah.
This is an easy game. Jets versus 49ers.
49ers.
Niners. Yeah.
Hey, come on now. Titans versus Jaguars.
Titans.
I have Titans
I'm not
too.
truly buying the Minshew mania. I know he had a great game, and he was able to use some of his new receivers. I love Laviska Shenault, but I just think the Titans are too consistent in what they do. And once they figure out how to not choke every single field goal they take except for the last one, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I like Minshew. I'm a believer in Minshew mania, but I think with such a bad supporting cast other than DJ Chark and Taylor Eifert has sort of been injury prone, so you never know what happens there. And Laviska Shenault, you never really know. I don't think that it's going to be a great game to watch for that offense.
They just don't have power.
Packers
Yeah.
versus Lions. Come on now, y'all. Packers.
I have to take the Packers because I'm relying on them pretty heavily in fantasy this week.
That's true.
I'll take the Packers. I think the Packers are definitely the better team, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it could be a pretty close game. I think the Detroit Lions offense is better than what people think. It's just defensively they're kind of suspect.
Okay. Dolphins versus Bills. I got Bills.
I have to take the Bills in this one. I hate to take the Bills in this one, but as a Dolphins fan, watching our offensive line, we looked really good on the offensive line. Only one sack allowed, I think, the whole game. And Myles Gaskin ran pretty well, which was surprising. But our defensive line looked horrible, especially against the quarterback run. And Josh Allen is essentially a Cam Newton 2.0 in a way.
Yeah.
The Dolphins' offense is just we played well, but Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's not it right now. He's not making the right throws. He's always late, costly turnovers. Against the Bills, they'll punish us.
It's not Fitzmagic anymore. I think that this would be. I think with your offensive line playing the way that it is, I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to get Tua in for a little bit, sort of dip his toe in the water.
Yeah, my whole feeling with Tua was you can't play him until your offensive line has proven they can protect him. I think one game is too small of a sample size to really say, okay, we trust his health. But I think it would be really cool to give him a chance this game, especially if the game script gets sort of out of hand. Fitz throws some picks against a really good secondary led by Trey White.
And Micah Hyde and
Jordan Poyer. This could definitely be a Tua sighting.
Yeah, plus I think that the Dolphins line proved itself against a pretty decent pass rush. Chase Winovich, Simon Guy, a few other people. I think that this would be a good game to test him out. Colts versus Vikings. I got the Vikings in this one.
I have the Vikings. Their defense didn't look too good, especially that secondary, but I don't think Phillip Rivers is consistent enough at this point in his career.
I think after that game against the Jaguars, who have dumped everything that they have on that team, I have very little faith.
Yeah, he's done. He's over the hill. Phillip Rivers, he's just a turnover machine at this point, and I think the Vikings' offense is too explosive.
Yeah.
Plus, I think with an official number one receiver of Adam Thielen, it'll be a lot easier for them to get the ball downfield because they really had to split passes between Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Cardinals versus Washington. I got the Cardinals.
Definitely the Cardinals.
Yeah, the Cardinals as well. That's easy.
But I do really like what I'm seeing from that football team pass rush with 5 first-rounders on that offensive or the defensive line with Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne,
Montez Sweat.
Ryan Kerrigan, and
that defense has a lot of potential.
Montez Sweat.
Yeah, Montez.
I mean, I don't really like the defense overall because I think the
secondary is weak too.
Yeah, I think the linebacking core in the secondary leaves a lot to
be desired.
Yeah. Texans versus Ravens.
Gotta be the Ravens. I appreciated the sigh because that's what Texans fans will be doing as the Ravens are blowing them out.
And
as Dolphins fans, we are also very happy about
Deshaun Watson.
Because the Dolphins do have the Texans pick, and that AFC South is looking like it'll be very competitive. And the Texans have a hard schedule.
And the trash team.
Yeah. I don't think he'll be able to work his magic this time.
This should be a unanimous pick. Chargers versus Chiefs.
Oh, the Chiefs.
The Chiefs. The Chargers played some good games against the Chiefs last year, and they managed to win one, I think, 2 years ago during Mahomes' MVP season. But I just don't think that team's consistent enough at Q.
I think that this might be a good game, to try Justin Herbert out just a little bit because
Too early, I think.
I think that the Chiefs' defense isn't very good in terms of secondary. Not including Tyrann Mathieu, I don't think their corners are anything to behold.
I
Yeah.
doubt Justin Herbert's playing this year. If he does, it'll be really late. I think the Chargers see themselves as a contending team to make the playoffs.
Seahawks versus Patriots. I have the Seahawks in this one. It's in Seattle. I think
also have
the
the Seahawks in
Patriots
this one.
are going to be a wildly overrated team this year.
In Seattle might wind up being a question mark. The air there, some issues, but I also think that Russell Wilson will be able to prevent those turnovers that Fitz gave up last week against that defense. Even though that defense is still pretty solid, they had a lot of opt-outs. The Patriots did.
Yeah, I mean, Russell Wilson absolutely picked apart our secondary,
MVP
which I
Russ.
sort of expected.
Russ.
Yeah.
You have to remember, everyone's hyping up Cam Newton. He played the Dolphins. They can relax.
Yeah, the Patriots probably don't win that game without the 3 interceptions, and Russ is not throwing 3 interceptions.
Yeah. The Dolphins were in that game until the very end. It's not like it was a blowout. It was closer than the score.
Yeah. All right. For the final game, Raiders versus Saints. I got Raiders in this one.
I have the Saints. It'll be interesting to see what that offense looks like without Michael Thomas. You haven't seen a Michael Thomas-less Saints offense for a while. I'm curious to see how much they use Taysom Hill to replace him.
I think Taysom Hill's really nice. I think he made a mistake re-signing with New Orleans. I think he should have went and tried to do his own thing, but maybe Sean Payton promised him something when Drew Brees is gone.
Yeah, Sean Payton's always said that Taysom Hill's the fastest guy on that team, and they have Alvin Kamara. They have Deontay Harris. They have some really fast guys there, and he says Taysom's the fastest of all of them.
Yeah.
I think Jameis Winston, since we're talking about the backup quarterbacks there, I think that Jameis Winston showed in the offseason that he's a lot more dedicated to being a bit more patient, that he's not always looking for the deep throw, which was...
I really like Jameis Winston in that offense because you think about adding someone who's not necessarily known for accuracy for decision-making to a team with the greatest accuracy quarterback of all time who doesn't turn the ball over.
Yeah. I think that this will definitely be a prove-it year for Jameis as a backup.
Yeah.
I think he proved that he wants it by taking such a small contract.
Yeah. I think that's Taysom Hill's team. I think that they want Taysom Hill to be their backup there. He'd be such an electrifying quarterback. So nice in that offense.
I don't know. I think just playing straight up as a quarterback, he wouldn't be as good as people think he is. But that's just me. All right, now, so moving on to the next topic. So earlier this week, the NFL announced on its Instagram and on its other social medias that it revealed the players who will be considered for the 2021 Hall of Fame class, and this class included 14, I believe, first year or players who are eligible for the first time to be in the Hall of Fame. So on this list, we have, sorry, just give me a moment. While I find the list quickly, the premise of this next segment is that we are going to take one player from the list or two players from the list, one that we think should make it and one that we think shouldn't. So this list includes quarterback Peyton Manning, wide receiver Calvin Johnson, wide receiver Wes Welker, wide receiver Roddy White. I believe Heath Miller and Steven Jackson were running backs. DeBerkshire Ferguson and Logan Mankins were both offensive linemen. Charles Tillman, Charles Woodson were both cornerbacks. Jared Allen, Justin Tuck, and I believe Kevin Williams were all defensive linemen, and Gerard Mayo was a linebacker. So I'm going to start off with the person that I think belongs in the Hall of Fame, Roddy White. And I know that you are all going to call me a homer because I want a Falcon in the Hall of Fame. So
Homer.
Yeah, whatever. So currently there are 3 Falcons in the Hall of Fame. Quarterback Deion Sanders, who played with us 89 to 93 or 94. Claude Humphrey, who played with us in the 70s, I believe, and Morton Anderson, who played with us in the 90s and 2000s. I think he was even on the team possibly into the late 2010 or early 2010s. But I think Roddy White had a wildly underrated career. So for his first 2 years as a Falcon, 2005 and 2006, he only had 400 yards and then 500 yards the next year. I think, if you look at how many games he started 8 in his first year and 5 the next year. So he was never really a starter. But then from 2007 to 2012, he started every single game and put up at least 1,200 yards with at least 80 receptions. Made the Pro Bowl from 2008 to 2011, All Pro in 2010, and he had 115 receptions for 1,389 yards. But then his numbers dipped by 640 in 2013 when he only caught 711 yards. I think the big problem in 2013 was the overall the team was not doing very well. They finished 4-12. The team really struggled to find its identity on offense because Julio Jones, who was then a third-year receiver, was injured and was only able to play for 3 games. So Harry Douglas had to step up and basically be wide receiver number 1, and he caught he was the only receiver on the team to get 1,000 yards. But the biggest problem was that Ryan, despite the fact that he had 4,500 passing yards that season, he spread the ball around too much to way too many receivers. And the lack of run game forced the offense to be sort of 2D and really predictable, which allowed for opposing defenses to sort of just stack coverage and not really have to be worried about the box and the run game. And then in 2015, which was his final year, he only had 506 yards and 1 touchdown. So the Falcons, the 2015 offseason, had fired their entire coaching staff. They had a new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. So the team had now been switched from a really heavy pass-based offense into a more West Coast gunslinging team. And the run game was wildly improved with second-year running back Devontae Freeman now rushing for over 1,000 yards. So all of this new offensive improvement was thanks to Kyle Shanahan. So with a more 3D and versatile Falcons offense, 2015 was basically the year of Julio Jones. Jones caught 33% of all of Matt Ryan's passes for 1,800 yards. And most of the other passes went to Devontae Freeman or Jacob Tamme. They basically sucked up all of Ryan's yards that season, which prevented Roddy White from getting all of that, or getting from as many yards as he was used to. And I think him being 34 at the end of his career was a big problem for that. So, Dylan, who is your Hall of Fame in?
Okay, so after we just heard about the entire life of Roddy White, including such things as where he was born, who his wife is, stuff like that. My guy who I think should make it is a better receiver in Calvin Johnson. The main reason for me for Megatron, even though he had a short career, is because I'm all about what you did to help my team. I'm all about that prime, how what you did at your best compared to other people. And he had, I think, the highest receiving yard season in NFL history. He made a not so good Lions team look a lot better than it did. He's the main reason Matt Stafford kept getting paid. And I just think he's a fantastic football player, great career. And yeah, he cut it short, but I think I would cut it short too if I played on the Lions.
Definitely.
I think him and Barry Sanders are two of the most comparable careers in NFL history.
Just wasted talent.
Because exactly, a wasted talent. It's arguable. It can be argued that both of their careers were the best primes for any players at their position, just because of how consistent they were on a not good team. So yeah, Jerry Rice might have put up more numbers over a longer time, but he also had a better team around him. There were other weapons. There was Sidney Taylor and Roger Craig competing for touches. So yeah, Calvin Johnson was the only guy there for a long time, and he still helped Matt Stafford put up numbers and even led them to some playoff appearances.
Okay, sorry guys to go off topic very quickly, but there was just a report that Anthony Brown, cornerback for the Cowboys, is now on the IR with a rib injury. So now that affects, I'd say that affects the Cowboy Falcons game outcome pretty significantly. But let's go back to the Hall of Fame. So Josh, who is
the Falcons receivers might have some more space.
I have a few in me.
All right. So who's your in for the Hall of Fame?
I'll go the obvious choice, the Sheriff, Peyton Manning. He's an obvious Hall of Famer. Top 5 quarterback of all time. One of the greatest statistical seasons of all time. When people said he was past his prime, has almost every possible accomplishment you could ever want out of an NFL quarterback. And just a really class guy, really good dude. There's no bad stories about Peyton Manning. He got up, went to work, did his job, and came back home to his family. He's the Sheriff. He's Peyton Manning himself. For the longest time, some people would call him the GOAT. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play NFL football and an obvious Hall of Famer.
Yeah, that absolutely. All right, so next for my not going into the Hall of Fame is Justin Tuck. So Justin Tuck played with the Giants as a defensive end from 2005 to 2013, and then the Raiders from 14 to 15. So in 2005 and 2006, he had 1 sack and then no sacks the next season. But it was his first 2 years. He wasn't a starter. He was basically playing in the shadow of Michael Strahan. Then in 2007, despite only starting 216 games, he got 10 sacks. Next season, he got 12 and got Pro Bowl and All-Pro. But then in 2009, he had a pretty bad season compared to the previous 2 with only 6. And then he got 11 and a half sacks the next season, then 5, then 4, then 11 in his final year with the Giants. Then when he went to the Raiders, he got 5, then 1. I think a lot of this is due to age and him being sort of a system player. When the Giants pass rush did well, he did well. When they didn't, he didn't. If you look at the years, it's a lot of. If you look in the years that he did poorly, it was just a lot of switching up the system and no one on the defense doing particularly well. I just think he was too inconsistent to be in the Hall of Fame. Too few years. And I mean, 10 sacks, I wouldn't say that those are average numbers, but you've seen other guys get those sorts of numbers not end up in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. So for my didn't make it, I have Gerard Mayo, and kind of for the similar reasons that you said, Justin Tuck. Uh, and it's mainly because they're more system players. So Gerard Mayo, he was a nice piece for a Patriots defense that was pretty good throughout the last decade, mainly late 2000s to early 2010s. But his best season was only 113 tackles, and his second best season 100, and after that 87. So really, he wasn't a tackle machine. He didn't put up that many stats, and those are solo tackles, which I think matter more. Um, for his sacks, for his career, he only had 11. So he wasn't a pass rushing linebacker, and that's okay because he was more like defending against the run, and he wasn't asked to do that much on a Patriots team that was just more of a system bend don't break in a way. He never had interceptions, 3 for his career. So it's just sure he helped them win, and he might have been a nice piece for a few good Patriots teams, but he does not deserve to be in the Hall of Fame because he didn't do enough himself.
Yeah, I think the most deceiving thing about his career though is his tackles in 2013. I think he only was able to play in half the games. I think so. I calculated it, and it was if he played that entire season, he would have gotten like 90 something tackles. But then you're right that he was too consistent, that he never really put up spectacular numbers. Just he was always just sort of tackle leader on the team.
Yeah.
Okay, so for my didn't make it, I have Wes Welker. Wes Welker. He's a good player, definitely, but he's not a Hall of Famer. Former Dolphin, so it hurts to say, because any Dolphin that makes the Hall of Fame is great. But he's played with two of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and still has never put up any remarkably outstanding statistical seasons. He's your average, goes out there, does his job, gets his 3 or 4 catches a game, always seems to be in the right spot at the right time, but he's just not like a transcendent talent. When you see guys like Calvin Johnson, who has a shot to make the Hall of Fame, you can't compare him and Wes Welker and just look at Wes Welker's accolades because he has a few rings from playing with Tom Brady and Peyton Manning to think that he deserves to be a Hall of Famer. I just
Yeah,
don't think that he has done
I,
enough.
yeah. I think Wes Welker is definitely just the sort of favorite archetype for Tom Brady, for like his favorite type of receiver, just sort of the short white kid that nobody really knows about that you can put in the slot. Like
Yeah.
part of the reason that I think he'll like Scotty Miller in Tampa Bay so
Yeah.
much is he's literally made a career out of making short white kids look like number one receivers. He did it with Wes Welker. He did it with Julian Edelman. I think
Danny.
I don't think he'll be able to do it with Scotty Miller, but I think Scotty Miller is definitely going to be able to put up some solid numbers.
Definitely.
All right, so for our next segment, we're going to be taking one game from week 1 that we liked and talking about, what we saw, what we liked, what we didn't like, what we think a team may need to change, or if there's a certain player that just sort of fluky didn't really like. So for my game, I picked the Cardinals 49ers game, which I think all 3 of us predicted wrong. I think all 3 of us predicted that the 49ers were going to win, because I think we all sort of agreed that as much as we like the Cardinals and what Kyler Murray and his new receiver DeAndre Hopkins are capable of, we thought that a solid 49ers defense would have been able to sort of outdo them. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of what we saw in that game throughout the league that week is the NFC West is tough. Very tough. Probably the hardest division in the league. I think the only
I
other league.
completely agree. 1
I
through
think
4 in that division.
Yeah, I think the other division that might even be comparable is the NFC South, but I don't think the Panthers are I don't think the Panthers are a playoff team this year. I think all 4 teams of the NFC West could 100% make the playoffs.
Yeah.
I think Trent Williams was a great destination for him. I think he showed that he's a great replacement for Joe Staley, and he can hold that left side line. I think that their line proved that they were good. I think they only let up maybe 1 or 2 sacks against a not terrible Cardinals pass rush. Raheem Mostert, I'd be a little bit concerned about him because he only ran for 40 something yards, but he did have 90 something receiving. But I think that was only because he had that 184-yard receiving touchdown where he basically just turned it up. Jimmy G really struggled without Deebo Samuels, who was on IR, and Emmanuel Sanders went to the Saints this offseason. Kyler Murray is a very serious MVP candidate, and I think he showed that. I think we can all agree on that, right?
Yeah, I in episode 1, rest in peace. I predicted that Kyler Murray was my dark horse MVP, and I think he showed exactly why. And my feeling about it was he's not going to put up the passing numbers, but he is completely capable of having enough all-purpose yards to really MVP.
He made the big plays, and I think that he's comparable to Lamar Jackson in a way. He just never had the same supporting cast, at least in terms of the offensive line. The Cardinals' offensive line is terrible.
Yeah, but the Cardinals' weapons might be better than even the Ravens.
That's true, but the Cardinals'
offense is stacked.
Yeah, the Ravens had, Ronnie Stanley, Orlando Brown Jr., Marshall Yonda, Bradley Bozeman, and someone else, but that line
really nice line
was stacked. Lamar Jackson was able to sit in the pocket, and even though he could run, he wasn't forced to. But I will admit that I was a Hopkins doubter. Proved me wrong. Proved that DeAndre Hopkins will still be a priority with his new team, and that I have faith that he'll actually be able to put up the numbers this season. From the first episode, my prediction was that he was one of my fantasy busts, but it's looking like he'll have a pretty decent season. And then that 49ers defensive line had a really hard time with Kyler Murray. A very, very difficult time.
So my prediction, well, the game I wanted to review actually, is Cowboys-Rams. And my feeling about that game was, I would say that the Cowboys got robbed because that was a horrible call, but I also don't feel like any football game is decided in just one call. I feel like the Cowboys offense had some good moments. Amari Cooper caught a lot of passes, but even still, if you're only averaging 8 yards per reception, that's not helping your team enough. Zeke ran the ball quite well. We already know that offensive line's super talented, but Lyle Collins has been hurt, so that offensive line isn't as good as it once was, especially because Frederick retired. And Blake Jarwin.
I'm pretty sure they also put Zach Martin at right tackle in place of Lyle Collins.
Yeah, they were maneuvering a lot to try to figure out what would work against Aaron Donald and the rest of the Rams pass rush, especially because they got Michael Brockers back. But
and Sam Abukum, who I think is wildly underrated.
Yeah, definitely an underrated guy. So I felt like the Rams showed some promise with the way they gave the ball to Cam Akers and Malcolm Brown, making sure that was a balanced attack, throwing a lot to Robert Woods. Not as much Cooper Kupp as maybe some people would have liked to see. I know I love Cooper Kupp, and I know a bunch of people love Cooper Kupp.
But like I said last week, Jared Goff has sort of graduated to Robert Woods.
Yes. And I also feel like Robert Woods is more consistent than Cooper Kupp, the way he runs his routes, because Cooper Kupp's kind of a smaller target. So the Rams definitely look to establish the run, and they were able to do so, but I don't think Malcolm Brown's going to run as well as that every week. I also don't think he's going to be the guy there. I think Cam Akers is a more talented back, and I
Yeah.
think Darrell Henderson's going to carve himself a role.
Yeah, I mean, like I was gonna pick up Malcolm Brown off of waivers in our fantasy league, but then I realized, I mean, it's one game against a pretty weak Cowboys, like a pretty
D-line
average defensive line and an injured
with banged up
linebacking core.
linebackers. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, I'm gonna pick up Naeem Hines instead because I think he showed in the past few seasons that he's more capable than Malcolm Brown, anyways.
Yeah.
Okay, so for my game of the week that I want to look back on, I want to talk about the Colts and Jaguars game. I think it's a really interesting game because the narrative before the season started was that the Jaguars were just going to tank and try and get Trevor Lawrence. But every time I watch Gardner Minshew play, he has franchise quarterback written all over him. I'm a believer in him. Do I think he's going to carry the Jaguars to some magical season this year? No, he's not. But I think that he's a real franchise guy, and I think that him playing as well as he does makes it increasingly difficult to justify tanking for Trevor Lawrence, because then what are you going to do? I think
I
that Gardner Minshew deserves to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. He outplayed Phillip Rivers last week, and just last season he was outplaying many quality NFL quarterbacks that many people like.
yeah.
I totally agree. I think
Yeah.
Gardner doesn't prove that he can lead a team to the playoffs this year, but I think that roster around him isn't meant to make the playoffs. I
Yeah.
think what he's going to prove is that, hey, we don't need a quarterback. We need some more receivers around me. We could use a running back. And
Yeah.
everyone
get-
knows they could use more offensive linemen.
Yeah,
So
they
I
could
think
get
the defense is actually still solid. I loved the picks of Chason and CJ Henderson. CJ
Yeah.
Henderson coming up with a clutch pick last game.
Oh yeah, CJ Henderson played really well last game, but I think you're right that if they do poorly and they get an earlier round pick, which I expect them to have, because I coming into the season I really like the Colts, but I think that with Phillip Rivers at quarterback, it sort of showed me that I shouldn't have too much faith there. But I think if you want to get anybody for that team, I think Panay Sewell, I don't really know how you pronounce his name, the left tackle from Oregon.
left tackle, really good
Could
player.
be good. Jamar Chase could be good. Who's that running back from Alabama?
Najee Harris. But
Yeah,
yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that it's similar to the Washington football team situation, because another win that was surprising. Both similar scores. Were they both 27-17?
I think that the score was different.
Okay. Well, either way, similar game script. The Eagles were
It was 27-20.
okay. So yeah, similar game script. The Eagles were comfortably leading the football team and blew it. But I don't think that's characteristic of what the football team's going to be able to do for the rest of the season. Same with the Jags. The Colts were leading. They were looking good, and then the Jags stormed back. But I think those are still two teams that could end up 1-2 in draft order. I wouldn't base much
Yeah.
off of what we've
Yeah.
seen. But
I don't really want to
yeah.
stay on the topic of the football team Eagles game, but I think that a lot of pressure just went to Carson Wentz because of an injured Miles Sanders, and they couldn't run the ball because he was injured. The line was too banged up, and then he couldn't get a pass off because Chase Young, Ryan Kerrigan, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, and Montez Sweat were all just screaming off the line to come at him. They got 8 sacks in total. All right, and then for our
The Eagles' offensive line is going to have to play better, though. Carson Wentz is getting killed out there, and if they keep calling him injury prone, but he doesn't have the greatest protection in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for our next subject, we have fluke performances. So just sort of players who we saw had really good either fantasy or just generally good performances in week one, that we think, don't get too close with them. We don't think that they're really going to have a great season. And mine saddens me to say, I'm actually using two players, both the Falcons receivers, Russell Gage and Calvin Ridley. Listen, I love Calvin Ridley. I think that this is going to be his year. I think he'll get at least 1,000 yards, not by much, but I think that this is the year for him, and I think Russell Gage is a really solid number 3. But I would not these numbers of Calvin Ridley being 4th in the league in receiving with 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. Do not expect those sort of numbers every week unless Julio Jones gets injured. And do not expect Russell Gage to be putting up 100 yards a week. He's the number 3 receiver. This is like a one-time thing. I think average, he probably gets like 50 yards per game. And I think that might even go down by more when we start incorporating Todd Gurley and our other running backs and Hayden Hurst more.
Yeah. I totally agree with that about the offense. So for mine, I was going to originally say Malcolm Brown, but I thought I touched on him a bit too much there when I was talking about my Game of the Week review. So I'm going to switch mine to Robbie Anderson, who got most of his production on a 75-yard touchdown reception where he just burned by the defense, probably a miscommunication, if anything. But he also had a few more catches. All in all, he had like 23 fantasy points for the day. So that's incredible production, something you would definitely take from a receiver. But I don't think the Panthers are going to be that type of offense. Their best running back is Christian McCaffrey. Their best receiver is Christian McCaffrey. I wouldn't be surprised if their best quarterback was Christian McCaffrey. Not actually. Bridgewater is a great player, consistency-wise, but he's not going to throw 75-yard touchdowns every week. I also think DJ Moore was wildly underused in that first game, and that he'll be upset with that role, and the Panthers will be upset with not getting him the ball enough.
Yeah, plus I think Curtis Samuels is also very good. I think that it would be smart of them to get him more involved.
Yeah. So
if not to trade him.
Yes, exactly. So definitely the reason that Robbie Anderson won't be that good is because of the pieces around them. Not that Robbie Anderson isn't a talented guy, even though he thought that the Panthers mascot was a bear.
What is the thing?
Yeah, but that's my thoughts on Robbie Anderson.
Okay, so for my guy that I think played really well last week but won't play as well the next week. Okay, so I was originally going to talk about Cam Newton, but I touched on him a little bit earlier and we were talking about the Patriots and how they played against the Dolphins. So I want to talk about Mitchell Trubisky. I think that he versed a very poor defense in Detroit, and I think they kind of collapsed near the end of the game. I don't think that he'll look as great as he did last week. I think that he still has a lot of pressure on him, and the whole city of Chicago is just waiting for him to mess up because they want to see Nick Foles play. I just don't think he's that great as a passer. I think that he has a lot to work on, but it's not like I think he's awful either, because if a quarterback like Josh Allen, who can barely complete 60% of his throws, can be successful, then why can't Mitchell Trubisky be successful? I just don't see the production that he produced last week reoccurring again.
Yeah, to add on to that, when you said the Lions defense just got worse towards the end of the game. By halftime, they were down their top 3 cornerbacks. Okuda, the third overall pick of this year's draft, Justin Coleman, who's a widely underrated slot corner, and Desmond Trufant, all were hurt by halftime. So really, it was the Bears versus the Lions backup corners, but not even backup corners. They're scrub cornerbacks. The Lions were trying to just get enough people on the field to keep going in that game.
Yeah, throw a safety in there. If you get really desperate, throw in a linebacker who's a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because they were down tons of points. I think it was like 17-0 or 20-something. They had like 3 points. Mitchell Trubisky was doing nothing on offense. They couldn't get anything figured out. And then once Detroit got their secondary depleted, that's when he decided to look like an NFL quarterback again. I just think that's kind of suspect.
Yeah, plus I
Yeah.
think Jeff Okuda was not playing very well during the offseason. So I would have been a little bit skeptical anyways, even if Jeff Okuda was in.
Yeah.
All right, so just a sort of for fun topic before we get into the game of our picks for the game of the week, because we all know that the game of the week that the NFL picks is nonsense. Half the time it's the Cowboys. But I want to talk about Allen Robinson. So earlier this week, I believe he requested a trade. So just quickly go around and share our thoughts on it. If there's a team that we think could use him.
Yeah, so I'll actually kind of want to start this one. So Allen Robinson is a useful receiver. He's more of he's not as much of a contested catch receiver as he used to be, especially in Jacksonville, because he's kind of getting up there, not too old yet, but he's more of a route running guy who's like good at giving his quarterback a reliable target. So he's getting tired of course, inaccurate throws from Mitchell Trubisky, as Josh touched on earlier. But I feel like a team that could really use him is a team like the Dolphins or maybe even the Jets, because and yeah, AFC East, I know, of course, I would know more about them because I'm a Dolphins fan. But I do feel like the receivers in the AFC East are a lot weaker than the cornerbacks in the division.
Yeah.
I
think him to the Jets would be interesting, but I don't think the Jets are looking to trade for a wide receiver right now, or really trade for any superstars. That is, I think the Jets are definitely in a tank rebuild year, definitely getting
I agree
like a top 5 pick. So I think that if they were to trade for Allen Robinson, it wouldn't be now or before the trade deadline. I think it would be towards the off season. However, a team that I do think realistically would possibly,
I think the Niners.
Yeah, exactly. I think like I mentioned earlier, Jimmy Garoppolo is struggling big time without Deebo Samuel and Emmanuel Sanders. And I don't know how serious George Kittle's injury is, but I think if George Kittle is really injured and he's out for a bunch of weeks, I think that it is imperative to having a good record that they do not just lean on Raheem Mostert, who I still think is wildly overrated despite a pretty good week 1 performance, and Jerick McKinnon, who
hasn't played football in forever.
Yeah, in like 3 years. Was he injured or?
He had like a knee injury or something.
Yeah, he had a pretty bad ACL tear and wasn't able to get back. And then once he finally was getting close, he had some more complications due to the injury.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sort of like a Jalen Smith thing, but different.
I don't think the 49ers even have the assets to go get Allen Robinson, though, because who would they trade away? They're like kind of in a really tough spot.
Yeah, I think they'd be willing to trade a first, and that should be all it would take. Because the Bears do want to keep him because he's kind of the only true wide receiver one they have. But Allen Robinson even said himself he probably will stay through the year. But if the Bears seem to think he wants to leave in free agency, I do think they would consider trading him, especially if a team like the Niners say, hey, you probably can't get a first for him from other teams. We're willing to give you a first for him because we need a receiver.
See, I don't think the Niners would be stupid enough to give a first for him. I don't think he's worth a first. I think you could probably give a second and then maybe a middle late round trade this year or the year after for him, and then maybe some random backup at a position.
I mean, the reason I think he's worth a first is because he's more productive than Stephon Diggs, who also garnered a first-round pick.
And the only reason
I think the Bills just sort of needed it.
I think the only reason I'd be skeptical to give up a first is because he's on a 1-year deal. So you have him for a year, and if he does decide he doesn't want to come back, he's gone.
That's true.
But these rentals are becoming more common, more so in other sports. it's more of a bigger thing in basketball, and baseball. It's happened a bit when you trade for guys at the deadline just to try to, keep them happy and see what happens.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what the Niners did with Emmanuel Sanders. They knew that there was a good chance he would leave, but they knew how badly they needed him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the big differences between like football and baseball, or football and basketball, obviously other than the sport itself, is the willingness to have players for basically just a year, and a willingness to sort of just let superstars go.
Yeah, like the win now mode, the idea of winning now.
Yeah, like I think I don't really know how to pronounce his name. Giannis.
Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, him. I'm pretty sure he's leaving in free agency this year, and I'm looking at him. I'm like, I don't really watch basketball, but I'm like, this dude's an animal, and you're probably gonna let him walk away this offseason.
Exactly.
All right. So for our final subject of the episode, we're going to be talking about our games of the week. So like I said earlier, it's just the game that we're looking forward to the most, because we all know that NFL's game of the week that they pick is always terrible. And
Bunch of crap.
50% of the time it's just a Cowboys game for no reason.
Yeah.
So for
Cowboys versus Jets, NFL game of the week.
Yeah, it's like, who's going to watch this? So my game of the week is the Raiders versus the Saints. So I predicted earlier that the Raiders would win that game. I think without Michael Thomas and only Emmanuel Sanders and a very, very old Jared Cook and an Alvin Kamara, who's probably going to be a little bit disincentivized to play as good as he normally does because he just got his deal, and I think we've seen that more than once where a player won't play as good right after getting a big contract because they know.
I feel like Ezekiel Elliott didn't play as well as he did after his contract.
Yeah, same with like DeMarcus Lawrence, because you paid them like $100 million and then they play like crap. But yeah. I think that Raiders Saints game is going to be a really good game. I really like the Raiders this year as a playoff contender. I don't think that they're looking at a Super Bowl, but I think that they're at least.
And I'm a huge Josh Jacobs fan.
Yeah, I really like Josh Jacobs. That offensive line is wildly underrated, even though they sort of blew the Colton Miller pick and had even though they could have picked, I don't know who came, or maybe it was, I don't know if it was Colton Miller and Quentin Nelson that got picked right next to each other, or if it was Mike McGlinchey and Quentin Nelson. But either way, I'm like those were two really good picks. I don't Colton Miller I'm not a huge fan of, but I think he's solid at left tackle. Richie Incognito is really old and wildly underrated.
I hate him as a guy. He made the Dolphins look bad more times than he made them look good. Yeah. But he's still a useful player and a Pro Bowl talent still, which is crazy given his age.
I think he's sort of amended his, I think he's sort of gotten better as a person, but I think that also came with age. But I think there have been some sort of sketchy stuff that's happened in the past few years. But Rodney Harrison,
Miami look like a bad franchise. Just no respect.
Yeah.
Rodney Harrison, I like him. He's just been a staple offensive lineman for the past 8 years.
Yeah.
Rodney
Hudson's good.
Yeah, he's been great.
I like Gabe Jackson, and I really like Trent Brown, but I think Trent Brown is actually injured, and I'm really, really looking forward to Darren Waller matching up against that linebacking core and possibly a cornerback. Because originally he played wide receiver in, I believe, college and when he was on the Ravens. So I think that could be interesting. And Henry Ruggs versus Marshawn Lattimore is going to be a great, great matchup to watch.
Yeah. So my game of the week is Patriots Seahawks. And I feel like this could wind up being more of a shootout than a defensive battle, because I think the Seahawks offense is so much better than its defense, and that the Patriots do have a talented secondary, but their linebackers are lacking because of opt-outs and free agency. and their defensive line will not be able to get to Russ as much as they want, even though that Seahawks offensive line isn't too great. So I think this has the potential to be extremely high scoring. I'm curious to see what Cam can do against a better team than the Dolphins, of course, even though it pains me to say things like that. But I feel like that game will be extremely interesting to watch.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true.
For my game of the week, I think the game that's going to be really good is the Colts versus the Vikings. I think it's two teams that came off a pretty bad loss in week one, teams that many people would pick to win the game from last week. I think they're hungry. I think they're two teams that can really need a win because going down 0-2 right now would not be very good for their season because they play in pretty competitive divisions. And I think that the Vikings specifically really need this win because the Packers look like they're not going to be an easy team, and any win that they can get outside of the division to help their record look better would be a real plus right now, especially at this stage in the season.
Yeah, I think that'll also just. I think there are a lot of games this week that are super interesting to watch. I think that there are very few games that are
Completely
truly,
lopsided.
Yeah. I think other than like the 49ers and Jets and
Bills and Dolphins.
yeah, no, I don't even think the Bills and Dolphins is going to be a blowout. I think it'll be a good game.
Their
But
defense.
I think the Bills.
So.
Listen, I think the Bills are a clear winner, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout.
I don't know. We struggled against Cam, and Josh Allen plays the same way. I just don't see it.
Yeah. We're just in for a good week of football. That's all that we can really say.
Yeah.
All right, so we have reached the end of I want to call it the first and a half episode, but this was really fun. I think we all had a great time recording. I hope you all enjoyed watching. If you enjoyed it, like, subscribe. If you want to follow us on Instagram, our Instagram is at the FF Podcast. Again, at THEFFPODCAST on Instagram. We do not have any other social medias. We record every Saturday. We'll be posting every weekend. I hope you all enjoyed.